In today's episode, I will be talking to Christine Perakis, who has survived 2 Category 5 hurricanes. We talk about what it's like to survive without knowing when help was coming and what lessons would be applicable to business. Listen in to hear the rest of our conversation. Before we begin our conversation, here is a quick shout out to the pathologically curious. Check out the Maverick Paradox magazine. It's a digital magazine written by Mavericks for business owners and professionals. You can find the magazine at themaverickparadox.com. The magazine's aim is to provoke maverick leadership everywhere. Welcome to the Maverick Paradox podcast, where we explore what it is to be a maverick and discover effective modes of leadership. I am Judith Germain, and my mission is to propel the maverick mindset into a world where character and integrity will ultimately have a higher premium than personality and bureaucracy. So thank you for joining me on this journey. If you would like to continue with me, then please subscribe to my podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or one of the other popular podcast platforms. And today, our guest is Christine Perakis. Hi, Christine.
Hi, how you doing, Judith? And thanks, everybody, for being here and giving me this opportunity.
Oh, yeah, I'm cool, and I'm really excited to hear from you. But before we start off, tell me a bit about yourself.
Well, I call myself a business growth architect because I love to get businesses from 0 to 8 figures in record time. And that involves not just from the idea stage, but full execution all the way to building the walls, the ceilings, the floors, etc. And I do that drawing from my experiences as a lawyer, a business advisor, a serial entrepreneur, a C-suite executive, and even a licensed 100-ton boat captain. So 5 continents. So that's all the pieces that are of any value to me, to the audience.
You have done a lot.
Yeah, I have a lot of interests, as I like to say. And, you know, it's important to me, and you'll appreciate this because this seems to be who you are, is when we're passionate about something, the best way to gain mastery is to learn how to teach, whatever that is. And so mastery has always been very important to me in all of my endeavors.
So would you say, because I think that mavericks are pathologically curious, do you have that pathology?
Oh, yes, tragically, yes. And a lot of interests. So I've had a funny, interesting looking resume.
Yeah. You know what? When I was looking at your stuff, one of the things that really fascinated me, and I hope you don't mind me saying fascinated when I say what it is that you survived 2 record-breaking Category 5 hurricanes, even when it tore the roof off your house and left you buried alive for 24 hours. And I was like, what?
Right? How did that work out? I live to tell the tale.
Yeah,
well,
tell me about it.
You know, it's the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? I mean, these days, a Category 5, we've had 5 Category 5 hurricanes come up in the last 2 years. And this was a record-breaking, most powerful storm in the Atlantic Basin. And as a professional mariner, a lifelong sailor, and a professional rescuer, expedition leader, you name it, I thought I had it, handled. And so, I spent the day preparing with friends, helping them, getting everything in order. We had checked and cross-checked ourselves. I had all the provisions I thought I would need, and I had everything anticipated. I was ready. And I went blissfully into my ignorant state alone that night. And the storm came, it tore the roof off, as you said, and left me trapped there. And I had no telecoms, no access to people, no one around, no idea who had survived and what was left after the storm passed and how I was going to get out. So it was the most traumatic and formative experience I had to date.
Yeah, what kind of mindset did you have to be able to just be there on your own?
Well, first ignorance, right? I mean, that's what I said. I wasn't even being tongue in cheek. It's the truth of it. I learned if I knew then what I know now, right? And we can say that about so many things. And the truth is, the hurricanes are interesting to hear about, but most people don't have that experience, so they're not relating. But everybody's had a Category 5 level experience that is completely out of their control. And so, what is the mindset, right? Because would that we all went into our Category 5 experiences with a mindset intention, And it wasn't until I realized that I was not getting out of there, and I had no idea how I was going to get out, and had no plan, nobody looking for me, no idea how this was going to happen, that the panic started to come. Right. And it was really, you talk about mindset. I was aware that I was starting to panic. I could feel, my stomach gripping, my panic rising, the fear taking me over. And that was the moment that my next book was born. And I said, there's something I can do, which is to start writing. I'm going to learn everything I can from this experience because I got nothing else. And so born out of necessity, I started making lists. I wrote about what I did right, what I did wrong, the mistakes I'd made, what I left, the resources that I had that I, left in other places, and no plan, and so that was the moment I think I was starting to write my book, but it was the thing also that kept my mind engaged. So when we're completely out of control in a Cat 5 situation, there is something we can do, and that is to activate the prefrontal cortex and start thinking something, right? Writing, getting a piece of paper and a pencil when nothing else is available. Imagine with no internet, no phone, no social media.
For some people that is a Category 5 event.
Exactly, I know. This is what I'm saying, right? I can't survey who's on Facebook right now. I mean, literally, I was on Facebook in the morning before the storm, checking out what my friends were doing, and just like I said, blissfully ignorant, thinking this is just another day. I'm all tucked in, and little did I know. So yeah, I was getting into motion, I think, is what helped me to activate my mind to be functional, so that when the time came, I could help myself get rescued.
That's interesting.
And live in the aftermath, the 2 months of no electricity, no running water, no telecoms, no cooking gas, that was all part of the experience, was the aftermath.
Wow. So you reach that realization that there is no one coming as of yet, and there is nothing that is comfortable in the situation. So are you saying that your mind grabbed onto what is the next thing that I need to do? Is that what kept you alive, thinking, well, when I'm finished, I'm going to be on national TV talking about this?
Oh, yeah, right. Plan the New York Times, the Washington Post, you name it.
You never know.
Yeah. Would that I were so conscious. No, what I just said was, I am going to learn from this experience. I've always been a person who wants to learn from everything that I'm doing or experiencing. And when there's nothing else, we can find the lessons of those things, right? When we're in utter despair, completely out of control, circumstances are beyond our grasp, we can learn stuff. How did we get here? What did we do right? What did we do wrong? There are steps that one can take that are functional, that will help propel us out of the panic of the actual situation.
Yes. What struck me when you was talking was that I think Mavericks are quite pragmatic. So you still do the big, oh my gosh, big fear, panic, running around like a headless chicken, like in circles or whatever. And then you go, okay, this is where it is. And then I noticed that for other people, conformists, that they keep looping round. So they never reach that point of going, well, this is just the way it is. Now what? They don't come off into the, detour out of that loop into right, the next thing is.
Yeah, that's the thing that when I did come back and actually was, being interviewed, and I was involved with the media, doing media around this experience, and journalists would talk about being in war-torn regions where they would interview people sitting amid the rubble of their bombed neighborhoods, or the devastation that they'd endured in any circumstance, whether it's storm or man-made or, conflict, and just catatonic, unable to move, immobilized, hoping, waiting for someone to come. And, in that situation, in our situation, 85% of the housing was destroyed. The storm was agnostic to its victims. So whether you were a government official or a, lowly street cleaner or just nobody like me, everybody was in the same position. So no one was coming. And it is common for people to I saw it on my island of people just expecting resources to show up. And, I think you would probably agree, the Maverick mentality would be, what can I do? Because there were things I needed. First I needed to get out, of my shelter. I had no idea. I didn't know my neighbors. How many of us live in communities where we don't know our own neighbors? It's a very common thing for big cities, and I imagine worldwide, right? And so, not knowing your neighbors, my friends are down the road, I can't reach them. My friends abroad are unreachable as well. I had no communication plan. I was as ignorant about this experience as anyone could be. And I'm a professional rescuer by training, so it's crazy to be in that position. But yes, there are steps to take. So, we always have one step in front of us that would make a difference.
So what are the lessons for business? So what have you taken away from that's applicable to people that's listening today?
Well, I've condensed it down to, in my next book that I have coming out, the 7 Barometers of Resilience. And in going through the experience and getting the support and help that I needed to kind of take it outside of myself, it really came down to these, 7 things that I felt were the factors, the strategies that helped me to not just get through, but to really come out of the experience and thrive. And I could say that the storm today was the biggest gift. And we can often say that, right, about things that have happened to us that have been super traumatic, like a death or a business failure, or financial distress. There are things that, because nothing ever stays the same. So when you're on the other side of it, then you can look at it that way, and it's helpful to know that there are some things you can do. And so, the cornerstone of what I call the 7 barometers is self-awareness, right? And you said, what's the mindset, right? Would that I were that conscious. I had, we're autonomic people and we respond to, triggers, and we tell ourselves stories about the thing that's happening rather than responding to the thing that's happening itself. And so, we have an expression in sailing, yacht racing, and boating is one hand on the boat, which is always being tethered to where you are and being aware of what's around you and what might come, and knowing that you've got one hand on the boat. And, these are leadership strategies that I think are, again, the cornerstone of getting through any situation in life and business and really coming through, thriving. So having that self-awareness, but also situational awareness, right? If the big, rogue wave comes and knocks you off your feet, or the storm, or financial distress, or competitive market factors, or, some regulatory, change, something that affects your business that you can respond to without going into panic because you have a bird's eye view of the situation and you're prepared. So that's, one of those really critical things. And, another one is communication, right? I look at communication as the number one metric for leadership. And there I was, I had no plan. I had no idea. I wasn't even thinking about people that would have a stake in my survival. Imagine. And so I didn't have any communication plan. So I didn't know how I was going to let people that cared whether I lived or died know that I was still alive, because, as I said, telecoms were down. And, communication is a really important leadership skill. And if it's lacking, it immediately in your results and how people respond. I mean, if we're talking the same way to everybody, we're losing 75% of our audience, by not understanding communication styles as a leader without a Cat 5 situation, And having really an understanding of how to develop, I call it a communication manifesto when I'm working with businesses, to really have a style, have an understanding, have an expectation that you educate everybody on the team about how we're going to communicate in various situations. It takes you a long way to success.
I like that. It just reminded me of something a few years ago when I used to work in corporate, and I had a young assistant, and every time she talked to me, she used to put me in panic mode because she'd always panic about everything. So she'd come and go, "Oh my God," and I'd be like, and I'm realising that I was always tensing up every time she came on. And in the end, I had to say, "Listen, it's not helping the way you communicate. What you need to do is just calm down, tell me the end result and work backwards, because that's the way my brain works." And and after that, she was like, "It was like, this is what's happened, but this is what's going to happen next." And I was like, "Okay, that's fine." Because I was realising that she was, because in the situation where I was, anybody who came in that state, it was very bad. So because you felt that all the time, it was like, "Oh my gosh, something disaster, someone's died, something's happened," and you're like, something, like emails down or something, and something so not important. So I had to
power
explain.
to you. Power to you for being able to teach her, right, how to communicate with you, because your level of awareness was so strong that you knew what was going to be effective for you.
Yeah, that's true. And also, it just kept the situation calm for everybody. And also, the respect for her from older people she had to work with went up because they didn't see her as frivolous anymore.
Right. And so how important is that, right? You want to get the best out of your team, no matter what the circumstances. And then God forbid there's an emergency or you need, like I say over and over, if I knew then, my last business, I ran a team of 160 people. And, if you want to really have a humbling experience, let them review your work performance, right? Mm-hmm. And in the very beginning, it was a startup. We grew it to 8 figures in 4 years. It was crazy growth and a very, intense pressure. And all I cared about was getting the work done. And, people cared a lot more than that for themselves. And I just didn't know until I let them, tell me how ineffective I was as a leader. So you learn from people if you let them teach you. People that report to you and all kinds of people.
Yeah, seeking that self-awareness is so important. I know that if I ever do leadership training and I say to people, when was the last time you asked a member of your staff how well you were leading them? They just look at you like you're crazy. And it's like, yeah, you need to find out.
Right. And they're going to have it's an interesting thing to match up what you think is your, drivers, your important values, the reason for being, and ask them what they think and see how far off you are,
I agree. So what's next on the strategies that you need to do?
So, obviously competence, right? That's kind of a given, but I look at it as in any situation or any enterprise, having what I call a float plan in offshore adventures. We have a system called the float plan, which is short of a business plan, right? It's really about the particulars of where we are, where we want to go, what are the obstacles we're likely to encounter, how have we provisioned, who's on the team, what do we have, what do we need, what might we run out of, and where should we be by certain points in time so that the stakeholders know when to come looking for us, and that's a piece that these again are the mistakes I made, right? I didn't have a plan for how to inform people I'm alive or not alive, or you should come looking for me, or here's who to contact. And so, those kinds of things, having a float plan so that people who care or people who have an interest can take some action by a point if you haven't arrived at your destination. And this is all metaphorical for any situation in life or business when you're setting out.
I love the idea of a float plan because it's very visual as well. Just the
and I've been in so many businesses. I've had 10 businesses on my own and with partners, and we've started businesses with and without business plans. And you talk about a business plan to a creative visionary entrepreneur and their eyes glaze over, like, who can I get to do this for me? And, it was a necessary evil, but what matters more is that you really understand what's your roadmap. and it doesn't have to be a 50-page business plan. It just has to be you understanding the journey as best you can and provisioning enough for it. And there's lots of ways to tell if there's a lack of competence. And, communication, poor communication is one of those primary indicators, right? I mean, if somebody is screaming, I get this on a yacht racing team where you have a person screaming out the back of the boat, the skipper, at something going on in the front of the boat because they don't know the job and they don't understand how it's all going to happen. So their lack of competence leads to poor communication and offending everybody on the boat. And then nobody's performing at their best anymore.
Perfect.
Right? Listen.
Yeah, so where are we now?
That's about 3, I think, right?
Wow!
We're keeping track.
I've written all these notes and I'm thinking, wow, that's only 3. I've got all these other stuff. So it's quite involved, actually, then.
Well, I've written a whole book about it. So, yeah, I mean, I'd like to think it's involved, but, it's those are really the most critical things we can do, right? The other stuff is along the lines of, I'm sure, what you teach and show and do is, judgment and decision making, right? Committing to a course. People don't ever think through how do they make decisions, and they don't communicate about their decision making styles. Are they going to be at Go ahead. I know that's
because I've got this huge grin in. You can't say it's just because people it just drives me crazy because I'm thinking now that most people make decisions based on emotion, but not any analysis. And I don't mean like with a chart. I think it's just this is what I think we should do. Why? Because I think so. But why? Because I think so. It's like, I know, but why? And then looking at you like, why are you challenging me? It's like, I'm not. I just don't understand your reasoning. What's the reasoning? Because I want to do it. It's like, that's not reasoning.
Right. And I combine it with judgment. I think of it as judgment and decision making. And Rita Mae Brown says, good judgment comes from experience. Experience comes from bad judgment,
Yeah, that's true.
So we've got to have some basis for why we're deciding, and then a system, right? So we have a responsibility as leaders to develop good judgment, however, the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? I admit it. I've made many mistakes in my life and career to learn to develop some good judgment along the way. And, that's how we do it, right? We don't beat ourselves up. We learn and we move on. Just like, I'm trapped alone in a storm in a wind coffin, and I'm going to learn something from this. So at least if I die, I'm going to die purposefully. And if I live, I'm going to I'm going to be able to weather the next storm, because there'll always be another storm, So that's the beauty of developing good judgment. It's not for the situation that you're in. It's for all the ones to come.
Oh, I like that. That's something well worth remembering. I like that.
Right. And decision-making styles, right? I mean, how are you going to get people to respond if you don't communicate how you're going to decide things? And if there's an emergency, it might be this way. And if you have plenty of time, it might be that way. And if you need to enroll your team and get their full engagement, it might be this way. That I see it all the time with clients, not being able to communicate effectively, and then not understanding how they're going to decide things until somebody blows up and then the business goes away. That is the extreme outcome in small business and startups and, growth companies quite often.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. Did you have that feeling that you would be okay anyway? Did you have that, like, it'll be all right?
Well, certainly by the time I got rescued, I thought I would be okay because I wasn't the only one trying to survive. And I think that once I got my mind occupied, the writing, and maybe I even napped a little bit in the hours that I was trapped, I probably felt like there would come a dawn. Right. I mean, that's the thing about every storm, no matter what it is in life and business, is that things pass. Market conditions pass. Financial distress is usually not forever. There's always a light that comes at the end of the darkest time. And, as hokey as that might sound, it is the fact that nothing stays the same. So even when we're in the worst of it, we can know that it won't stay this way, whatever that way is.
Yeah. The reason I asked you is because Mavericks, I don't know we're just crazy, but we have this innate feeling that we'll be okay. Which is probably why you have all that risk taking and and that pragmatism. It's like, that's fine. I can't swim, but I won't drown. I'll be fine. It's just like
right.
Belief
I know that's a little crazy, isn't it?
It is crazy. It is crazy, but it's really common, isn't it?
I think so, and I think about back to my life history and the stories I've experienced, things that I seem to be on the edge quite a bit. And you can't be an entrepreneur without that, right? And, the idea that what does it take to learn the lessons we need to learn? I when you were saying that, am I going to be okay? I think I've always felt that too. I mean, I relate to it. And yet, I look at what does it take to get my attention? And the chief overriding lesson that I learned from the storm, it took that. I didn't have to be in that position. There were junctures and pivots I could have made at certain points. And so what does it take, to get to that point where you really will be okay? And sometimes it just, for some of us, and maybe because we are so out there on the edge, that it takes a lot more to get our attention.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, so we have judgment and decision making.
Oh yeah, where were we?
This is really good. I'm writing notes actually while we're talking. That's why I want to.
Excellent. Well, we'll definitely compare notes offline too, because I'd love to hear more about Maverick paradox, obviously, and I'm sure there's a lot of synchronicity in our work and in our visions and our philosophies. But I talk about one's tolerance for adversity, having building a community. I mentioned the number one lesson that I learned in the storm was don't go it alone. And it's really my purpose for being, in that I want to make sure that nobody ever has to go it alone. And we have to start by building a community around us one way or another. I mentioned how I didn't know my neighbors, and many of us don't. And even as an entrepreneur, the journey can be so isolating and lonely. And in the States, at least, I think it's worldwide. There's an epidemic of loneliness that in the US, 40% of our population has no one to talk to. And the millennials, 25% will say they don't have a friend. And this is the age of social media. And I'm a person who has, my sailing community, my hiking community, my, social media followers, thousands of followers. You think that I never thought of myself as somebody who would wind up buried alive with no one coming, and so it's a responsibility we all have to recognize we have to build our communities, to have someone who will come for you in a storm. And really understand our tolerance for adversity. How much do we need to heap on ourselves, or can we just make it a little bit easier by making certain decisions a certain way? So those are the kinds of things. And I look at it as, you talked about mindset a bit ago, and I look at it as the self-concept, is how we, what concept we have about everything, how much money we have, how much we weigh, how successful we are, and how we achieve to our peak. And unless you become aware of it and you take active steps to change it, you will always be within 10%. It's like a thermostat, right? That keeps resetting back to comfort. And so you have to push yourself out of your comfort zone. And that's why, I joke about it takes me getting drop kicked, out of my comfort zone to really make those changes. And so knowing your tolerance levels and being able to exceed them is part of the responsibility that we have as leaders.
Yeah, I agree. One of the things I say is that Mavericks have never been comfortable in the comfort zone.
Right. That's beautiful. I love that. So yeah, and you can't live there and reach peak performance and be successful.
No, it's almost like Mavericks see the comfort zone as like a temporary rest place. So you've done all this, it's like, okay, and then off you go. It's not somewhere to stay and get a book and curl up in. It's a place to just literally grab some food, get a drink, repack your backpack and go.
Right? It's like, I think of marathoners, right? And they get those water stations where they can
Yes.
throw a cup of water down and move on, you know?
Yeah, exactly. It's like it's almost like you're with other people. You're like, what are you doing sitting down there? Get up.
Right? We got 10 miles to go,
Yeah,
or
the journey's
15
not
miles to
finished yet. Come on, we're not dead yet. Come on, keep going.
Right? It's the only way, really, to get through the marathon of life, you know, is to keep moving. And, you know, and what does that look like? So, you know, I think of it as like an expedition, right? We're all going out on an expedition, and who are my teammates? And are we the kind of people that can count on each other and know what to expect? You know, and that everybody's pulling their weight. And the most successful groups that I have participated in or experienced was when everybody is in a setting and they all feel like they didn't do as much as everyone else. That's an extraordinarily successful expedition.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Right, I've still got my pen, so I've got tolerance for adversity down. What have we got next?
Well, I think it's called Building Your Tribe is that barometer, and expedition rules apply. That was another one. And harnessing, well, we talked about harnessing the power of the storm. That's that self-awareness piece. And deciding your category 5 leadership style. You know, that's, again, drawing from some of the outdoor wilderness leadership strategies, that we all have the capacity and we all are leaders in various settings, right? It just depends on what our function is. I was on the island because it was paradise. I'd sold my last business and I got my boat captain's license and was delivering boats off the eastern seaboard, and just, you know, found myself in paradise and never wanted to leave. And the island was very good to me and the people of the BVI. And so I felt at home immediately. And you know, I didn't have a job there. I worked online and abroad and on the phone, and I didn't have a designated role or, you know, an official position. But when you're in a position, everybody's, you know, the island's been leveled, that we all have the capacity to step forward in some kind of leadership form. And so I talk about it in the book as, you know, 4 types of leadership: designated leaders, which are the obvious title holders and people we all look to in an official way, and peer leaders, and self leaders, and active followers. So we all have that choice. We can be the best darn active follower if there's a group that is taking the lead, or we can be a peer leader amongst our peers, and through self-leadership, you know, where we take responsibility on first for ourselves and then for our peers. And, you know, when I found myself completely alone and not accessible, I was trapped on my hilltop for days and I couldn't reach my friends down the road. I had to build community. I had to find a place for myself within that community, and I had to be of service so that others would, you know, be willing to share and give to me. So, you know, I had a moderately working car, a mildly damaged car, and I would go out on food and water runs, and, you know, people would help me with things. And it was a symbiotic relationship that got developed because we take that charge, you know, and take some form of leadership. And from there, you know, I became a media liaison. I was able to get comms out so I could you know, be a source for media. And I was able to volunteer to liaise for medical personnel abroad who wanted to come and help, and, you know, give information to the British Defense Ministry as they were needing data, and, you know, just making use of my skills, my capabilities, and the fact that I was able-bodied. And nobody is going to invite you to those roles. You assume them. You know, you take one step. You know, there's no invitation. You just step forward.
Yeah. The thing is, I guess at the time you probably didn't even see yourself as leading. You just did what needed to happen.
Yeah, exactly. I knew what I needed. You know, I needed food and water, and so did everybody else. You know, everyone needed shelter. So yeah, you just see where there's an opening. I ended up getting involved with the salvage company to help them bring heavy equipment abroad onto the island. That's not an easy task, you know, to purchase heavy equipment and be able to get it to the island. so I learned a lot, but I have the skills to do that kind of thing. So you just apply everything that you have to a situation. So anything that wasn't nailed down that I didn't need, I was giving to the community. So any extra bedding or food supplies or non-perishables, whatever I could contribute, you just do what is in front of you.
So does that community still exist now? I mean, are things back to normal?
Well, what is normal? I mean, I left the island because it was not tenable for me to stay. Eventually, I had to come back. And, normal takes, there's always a new normal after a category 5, right? It took me a good year and change to really recover from the experience in ways I don't even know. You don't realize you're in something and in the aftermath of something for so long until you're on the other side of it.
Yeah.
And that was really the helpful part of what I could do in terms of self-leadership was step forward. I started speaking. I, told my story. I let others help me draw the lessons from the storm through so I could come up with the content for my programs and my book. And I said, this time I'm not doing it alone. And so with the help of my close friends and other, mentors and I got an agent, I got a publisher, and, we got the book done, actually just hit send a couple days ago. So that was very exciting. Yeah, I'm very excited. But it was, it took a village. Right. So the community configuration would have, I guess I would say it changed, but the idea of community never did. So that part is still intact. And thankfully, I'm not going it alone anymore.
Yeah, I think the way that the world is going, it really is getting back to what it was in the past in terms of communities, isn't it? Because everything, it's so much harder to be sure of stuff. It's the thing that you'll be, it's the news that you're reading, is that true or not? Is that video you watched, is it that real person, or is it one of those fake videos? Or, it's getting to the point where you just don't know what to believe. So you have to have almost personal experiences with people to get a sense of what's right. Do you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? As time goes on, it's less things to trust.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it is terrifying, right? And we hope that the outcome of this time that we're in, is that it brings people closer together. And I have to believe that there is purposefulness in the polarization that we're living through right now. And I think you can appreciate it very well in your native country and me and mine, and, just how opposites we all are with each other, that, this experience that we're in has to be what brings us back together, because at the end of the day, we all want so much of the same thing, right?
Yeah, and I don't understand why people don't see that though. Everybody wants to be clothed, fed, have some fun, have a future, raise some children. Everybody wants the same kind. It's about what country you're in. You just all want to you want to live, don't you? You don't want to survive. You want to live.
Right. Absolutely. And so that is a place of commonality. So, that's another form of leadership, right? Of recognizing the commonalities and relating on those, even if we are, let's say, opposed through religion or politics or, certain attitudes about certain things, finding the commonalities and connecting there.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Okay. So what would your takeaway be for somebody who wants to be a resilient leader? What would you say?
Well, I would say, again, most importantly, don't go it alone. It was the thing that it's insidious, right? I have a thing in my book called the isolation index, because we don't always know we're in a category 5 situation. It's just business as usual for a lot of us. We go into financial distress, and then suddenly we're not taking phone calls, and we're not socializing, and we're quick to get angry and, lash out, and we don't even recognize ourselves, and we don't know what it's happening or why. And so, by not going it alone and recognizing that there are people who want to help, that we can diffuse those situations, make them better, be better at it, have better outcomes, get through them faster.
Yeah. And I can't see why anybody wouldn't want that.
Right? But it's so hard to do sometimes, right? Sometimes it's just the phone weighs too much. I had a friend tell me in the aftermath of this storm, she said, I've never seen you cry. I knew her for 10 years. I'd been through divorce, financial distress, you name it. And she'd never seen me cry. And I thought, wow, that was me keeping myself, away from people who care about me when I might have been well benefited by some support.
And that's the difference with the communities that have been made now, I think, is that they are becoming safe places to be vulnerable, and you're okay in that vulnerability. And I think that's probably the difference than from before.
Well, that's important, not just in community, but for leaders, right? Because the reason why I do what I do is because I remember when I was running my last business, it was growing so fast. We went from 0 to 8 figures, in 4 years. I had a team of 160 people. I was juggling cash flow, and, growth like that can crush a business as much as no business.
Yeah.
And so I didn't ever feel like there was someone that understood my path. And so, not having that is, the idea that I didn't have anybody and that I was doing it on my own could have been crushing. And so it's really important to me that others not have that experience if they don't have to.
Brilliant. That's fantastic. I think it's probably a good place to end the conversation for now, if that's okay.
Right. Absolutely. Because I'm sure we could talk all day.
Yes. And I was thinking you should come back again. And we talk
I would
about
love it. I would love it. I'm sure we'd have lots to talk about, because I love that, what you're about. And it just seems like we've had our common experiences and come through them very similarly, because there's nothing new under the sun, but we have different ways of communicating about them, and for those who need to hear it in a certain way.
Yes, that's true. We all have. That's one of the things I think is really important as a leader, is to have your own voice.
Yes.
And to own that voice.
Absolutely.
Cool. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I had so much fun. I thank you so much for having me on your show.
Brilliant. And you will be back again.
Fantastic. I can't wait.
Thank you. I hope you have enjoyed listening to my conversation with Christine as much as I enjoyed having it. If you are pathologically curious and would love to find out more about the Maverick Paradox, then please subscribe to this podcast on one of the popular podcast platforms. Alternatively, you could explore our resources on Mavericks at maverickparadox.com, or read the Maverick Paradox magazine. We publish frequently each week. If you subscribe, you will get our monthly newsletter. And let's not forget my book, The Maverick Paradox, The Secret Power Behind Successful Leaders. For those that love a good discussion, you could apply to join our exclusive Facebook group. And finally, if you would like to work with us or just interested in finding out more about the Maverick at work, check out our website maverickparadox.co.uk.